Yes.
Thank you. Bless you.
Okay, well, as often happens with me, I have several bits of paper around me, and I am as always really totally reliant on God to help me put it together. I wanted to just begin by sharing a bit of an update because I know it had been previously been mentioned that our daughter Gabriella, almost 2 years ago now, was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer, and it's only in December of last year that after having been pretty much clear that all the tumors had shrunk or disappeared, an amazing answer to prayer, she was told that she now had it in her liver and that she should go home and start making memory boxes for her little girls, both of whom are under 6. And I didn't feel on the receipt of that news any different to when we first got the bad news, that there was something here beyond what we understood, and there was a journey to take, and that however difficult, that it was not going to take her life. And so I shared before that Gabriella and her husband had both become believers quite shortly after the first diagnosis in June of 2023. They've come on in leaps and bounds, those two. But when you get that kind of news, when you think you're almost clear of it, it's pretty devastating. We prayed and we believed, we understood a strategy. I won't go into the medical details of it because I'll get myself into trouble if I did, actually. But the bottom line is, praise God, Gabriella is out running at the moment almost every day. And she's feeling quite well. She's had to have a mild dose of chemo at the end, which she's finished, done really well with it. And the results so far are very good. So praise God for that. We keep fighting. And it goes back to something I said earlier on about just trusting God. That's a microcosm. That's one family's major, huge problem. But it's a microcosm of problems that people are facing all over the world. And many of you listening to me, you're facing difficult decisions in your own lives. I'm always reminded of the scriptures: trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him and he will direct your steps. And that's what we've got to rely on. We've got to rely on God, and more so now than ever before, because of the way things are changing. Now, many of you will be familiar with the prophecies of the Bible. Many of you will have read the book of Revelation. You'll have read Daniel. And there's one particular verse within Daniel 12, which particularly speaks to the moment of time we're in. And it's in Daniel 12. At that time shall arise Michael, the great prince who has charge of your people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never been seen since there was a nation till that time. But at that time your people shall be delivered, every one whose name shall be found written in the book. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. And those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the sky above, and those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. And knowledge shall increase. Has there ever, in the history of the world, been a time when knowledge shall increase in the way that it has done now? I'm going to spend some time, a few moments, reading you something which I think you'll find useful, but I want to explain that what I'm going to read to you was an answer to a question that I asked. I asked artificial intelligence a question. And the question I asked was, how do current geopolitical events align with the book of Revelation? Now, if you'd have asked a computer that, I don't know, 10 years ago, I think you'd have got a few paragraphs. But I want to read you what the world's artificial intelligence, so this is the sum total of knowledge, if you like, produced in answer to that question. The question of how current geopolitical events align with the book of Revelation's prophecies is complex. It involves interpreting symbolic, apocalyptic texts through the lens of modern developments. Revelation, written by John around 95 to 96 AD, is a prophetic work filled with vivid imagery, addressing both first-century events and future eschatological outcomes. Its interpretation varies widely amongst scholars and theologians, with four main approaches: historicism, events unfold over history; futurism, prophecies await future fulfillment; preterism, most events occurred in the first century; and idealism, symbolic truths about spiritual realities. Below, I'll outline key themes from Revelation. Let me stop there. I will outline. Artificial intelligence is speaking to me as though it was a person. Okay? Key themes from Revelation examine current geopolitical trends and critically assess potential alignments, while noting the speculative nature of such interpretations. Key prophetic themes in Revelation. Revelation describes a series of events leading to the end times, including 1. Global conflict and chaos, wars, famines, pestilences, natural disasters. Revelation chapter 6, verses 1 to 8, the four horsemen. 2. The rise of a global power or beast, a political or religious system demanding allegiance, often linked to a one-world government or authoritarian regime. See Revelation chapter 13, verses 1 to 18 and 17, 12 to 14. The mark of the beast, chapter 13, verses 6 to 17, controls economic participation. Number 3, Babylon the Great, a corrupt, powerful entity, economic, cultural, or religious, that falls. Revelation 17, 18. Number 4, Middle East and Israel. Jerusalem and the Jewish people play a central role with references to a temple, tribulation, and Armageddon. See Revelation 11, 1 to 2 and 16, 16. 5. Antichrist and false prophet, figures deceiving the world and opposing God. Revelation 13, chapter 11, 18, and 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 3 and 4. 6. The return of Christ, the ultimate victory of Jesus, establishing a new heaven and new earth. Revelation 19, verse 22. And now the current geopolitical situation. Based on recent analyses, key geopolitical trends include conflicts and instability, the ongoing wars, Russia-Ukraine, Israel-Hamas, and rising tensions between the US and China, North Korea, Iran, fuel fears of a broader conflict. The Middle East remains a flashpoint, with Israel's strategic role drawing global attention. Globalization versus fragmentation. While globalization has interconnected economies, nationalism and protectionism are rising, disrupting supply chains and increasing cyber threats. Technological control. Advances in artificial intelligence, digital currencies, and surveillance raise concerns about centralized control over economies and societies. Moral and cultural shifts. Some Christian scholars note a falling away from traditional values in Western societies, aligning with 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 3. Israel's role. the re-establishment of Israel in 1948 and Jerusalem's recognition as its capital, for example, the US Embassy move in 2018, are seen by some as fulfilling the prophecies like Ezekiel 36 to 37 and Revelation 11. Potential alignments with Revelation. Global conflict and the four horsemen. Revelation 6 describes war, famine, and death. Current conflicts, e.g. Ukraine, Gaza, food security issues due to supply chain disruptions, could be seen as partial fulfillments. However, these are not unique to 2025. History is replete with similar crises, and Revelation's scale suggests global devastation beyond current levels. Speculation about World War III, US, Russia, China, tensions. This aligns with fears of escalation, but it lacks the apocalyptic scope of Revelation's imagery. The beast and global governance. Revelation 13 and 17 describe a beast with global authority, sometimes interpreted as a one-world government. Some point to global institutions like the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, or digital systems, digital IDs, central bank digital currencies as precursors. The mark of the beast is often linked to technologies controlling commerce, like digital currencies or vaccine passports. However, these interpretations are speculative, as Revelation's mark involves explicit allegiance to an anti-God system, not merely technology. Critics warn against conspiratorial readings, noting Revelation points to false religion, not secular technology, as a primary danger. Babylon the Great. Revelation 17 verse 18 depicts Babylon as a corrupt system, possibly economic, global trade, cultural, moral decay, or religious, apostate Christianity. Some associate it with Western consumerism or a revived Roman Empire, e.g. the EU. Europe's economic power and historical ties to Christianity fit historicist views, but the EU lacks the dominance described in Revelation. Alternatively, globalized culture or cities like New York could symbolize Babylon, though this is debated. Israel and the Middle East. Israel's restoration in 1948 and Jerusalem's centrality align with prophecies of Jewish return, Ezekiel 36 and 37, and Revelation's focus on Jerusalem, Revelation chapter 11 verse 2. Speculation about a rebuilt temple connects to current Jewish movements preparing for temple restoration, though no concrete steps have occurred. Revelation 9 13 to 16 mentions a 200 million strong army from the east of the Euphrates. Iran, China, Russia. Some link this to modern military alliances, but the context suggests a supernatural event, not a literal army. The Antichrist and the false prophet. No clear figure matches the Antichrist described in Revelation 13 or 2 Thessalonians 2 verses 3 to 4, who exalts himself as God. Speculation about global leaders or ideologies, e.g. secularism, radical Islam, lacks textual specificity. The false prophet could relate to deceptive religious movements, but no current movement fully fits the description. Moral decay and apostasy. The falling away, 2 Thessalonians 2 verse 3, is seen by some in declining Christian influence in the West and rising secularism. However, global Christianity is growing, particularly in Africa and Asia, complicating this narrative. Critical considerations. Revelation addressed first-century Christians facing Roman persecution, identifying Rome as Babylon and the beast. Preterists argue most prophecies were fulfilled by 70 AD or the fall of Rome. Symbolic nature. Revelation's imagery, e.g. beasts and horns, is apocalyptic, not literal. Mountains and kings, Revelation 17, 9 to 10, symbolize powers, not specific nations. Over-literal interpretations risk missing the spiritual message. Speculative risks. Linking current events to prophecy can fuel conspiracy theories. e.g. microchips as the mark. Revelation warns against false Christianity, not secular systems, as the primary end-time threat. God's sovereignty. Revelation 17:17 emphasizes God's control over nations, suggesting geopolitical events serve his purposes, not human predictions. There are diverse interpretations. Eastern Orthodoxy avoids mapping Revelation onto current events, focusing on spiritual readiness. Futurists await a distinct tribulation period, whilst idealists see timeless truths. Posts on X, so Elon Musk's platform X, reflects speculation about Revelation's fulfillment. So here, artificial intelligence is doing a deep dive into messages on X to get some information, and it says this. Posts on X reflect speculation about Revelation's fulfillment, with users citing Middle East conflicts, Israel's role, potential kings of the East, e.g. Russia, China. Some mention a little horn or Antichrist emerging from regional powers. These views are inconclusive and often sensational, lacking rigorous textual grounding. Conclusion. Whilst some geopolitical trends, Israel's prominence, global tensions, technological advances, can be loosely associated with Revelation's imagery, no current events definitively fulfill its prophecies. The book's symbolic nature and dual focus on first century and future events make precise alignments challenging. Revelation's primary message is spiritual. God's victory over evil and the call to faithfulness amidst trials. Christians are urged to avoid speculative hysteria and focus on obedience and hope in Christ's return, which will occur at God's chosen time, not through human prediction. For deeper study, consult Revelation's text directly or trusted commentaries and approach modern parallels with humility and caution. Well, I don't know how long it would have taken you to write that. I don't know how long it would have taken me. I'd have probably spent a few days on it. It took 145 seconds to produce what I've just read to you with artificial intelligence. Such is the power now that is in the hands of the ordinary man. An immense power for good and also an immense power for evil. One of the things which I often reflect on, it's as I travel in the course of business out and about as I was today, is seeing all the young people. I saw some in restaurants, I saw some at the roadside, all of them with their faces in a little, probably doing exactly what I've done there, actually, looking at AI. But what I'm saying is that there is this obsession with the technology. I thought the conclusion was really good. That no current event that we can see definitively matches, but we kind of know roughly what time it is. We know because of some of the things we're seeing that we're quite close, but we know we're not there. We're not at the moment yet of Christ's return. But the primary message being spiritual, God's victory over evil and the call to faithfulness amidst trial, is absolutely relevant to us. I want to shift gear a little bit now, and because I'm an intensely practical person, and I also believe that I'm quite observant in terms of observing things that are going on and then trying to draw meaning from them, things that are happening in the world. There are a few things that have happened lately which I think we should really take note of. Most of the things I'm going to talk about now you'll have read about in the news, and I'm just going to interpret them really in my own way and explain what I think they mean for us. So one of them was a blackout in Spain, which you've read. It was about 18 hours long. It does depend whereabouts in Spain that you were. Some people had less than that, but my uncle, who lives down near Malaga, he had an 18-hour blackout. It was utter chaos. Now, practically what happened was that Spain's primary producer had just a few days earlier celebrated the fact that for the first time on a weekday, Spain was completely reliant on clean energy, you know, the sun, the wind, etc., etc. And the next thing that happens is their world's in darkness. There's no phones, there's no money changing, there's no buying of goods, there's no light, there's no heat, there's no power, there's no electrical cars being charged. People are running around like headless chickens, not knowing what to do. Was it predictable? Absolutely. Is it going to happen here? Almost certainly. Why? Let me explain. When I was a little boy, more than 20% of Britain's energy was produced on the Selby coalfield. I think I've shared this with you before. One of the power stations, Drax, was able to produce 9% of Britain's energy on its own. They dug coal out of the ground, they burnt it in the furnaces, it made steam, they created power. These are spinning generators, electricity created from huge alternators creating power by harnessing the energy from steam. And basically, you know how if you have any understanding of how a generator works, they have to work at a specific speed in order to create the alternating current that we get eventually in our homes. So most towns and villages in Britain, they get a supply of between 410 and 415 volts in 3 phases. You can see my fingers, 3 phases. Every one of those 3 phases, when linked to the neutral, gives you mains. Solar power, wind power, doesn't work like that. So obviously the sun goes in, the sun comes out, there's a fluctuation in the amount of power. The wind blows at different speeds, so the giant turbines turn at different rates. There's no constancy to that. And so they use something called inverters. Spain's problem was that they had an acute lack of spinning generator power. And as a result, there was a fluctuation somewhere that the system said, can't handle that, can't maintain the alternating current, we better knock out the power. And what it did was, it knocked out 14 gigawatts of power in 3 seconds. So that was most of Spain and part of the south of France without power. A few years ago, I had a visit right here at Corner Farm from a man whose responsibility it is, or was then, to black start the national grid. I didn't know what a black start was, but he explained it to me. It's when something like just happened in Spain happens here. And what they have to do, they have to start with one spinning generator, get it going. It used to be a coal-fired power station. Get that online, get the frequency stabilized, start drawing power from it, and then add other power stations to it. That's why it takes some time. So just on that topic then, just on that one topic, I believe that we are at risk because it's going to happen. It already happened to Heathrow a few weeks ago. It happened the other day on the London Underground where there was there'd been a substation fire recently. I'm going to explain a little bit later on when I talk about a man called David Betts. I'm going to explain why I think that's so critical for us to take seriously right now. But I personally believe that is going to be one of the things we will have to face. Not necessarily for a long time, but I can tell you this, the government knows this, the military knows this, it's a known fact if you're in governance in this country. We are 72 hours from anarchy in Britain if there is a failure of the electricity supply, the money supply, or the food supply. And you can imagine how quickly, if the electricity supply fails, the two others follow: the food supply, responsive delivery, and the money supply. So that's a real threat that we need to carefully consider. Now, I'm mentioning these sorts of things just because it might be a prompt to some of you to do perhaps what you've been putting off. Make sure you've got some batteries for your flashlights, or make sure you've got a little £190 inverter like I've got, just so that you can immediately get a few things going, get your fridge going or something. So I'm just mentioning that because I actually think it's going to happen, and I think it may be something that's happens regularly, but I think it's something that we're going to have to get used to, because our grid is now fragile, very fragile. And on a cold winter's day, when there's no wind blowing, and the figures are in minus digits, we're already bouncing close to the top of what the Britain's national grid can supply. Those in the industry already know that. So that's one practical thing. I mentioned David Betts. Some of you will have heard of this man. David Betts is the Professor of Modern Warfare at King's College in London. He's been much in the news lately because of a podcast that he did, and that was followed by several interviews that he's done, where he makes a startling prediction. Now, this guy is no conspiracy theorist. He's an academic. He's someone who studies the nature of social conflict, studies the nature of modern and historic conflicts. And he is a trusted advisor to our government and our military. Textbooks, military procedures, government guidance has been written based on what David Betts says. This is what he said over a 1 hour, 42-minute podcast a couple of months ago. Britain will be in civil war within 5 years. Now that's a pretty, coming from someone like him, that's pretty shocking. He explains that it is potentially avoidable, but he sees no sign that anything will be done to prevent it. He goes into detail describing the various forces at work that make that inevitable. But one of the things that he refers to is what you and I would call the indigenous British population, ordinary folk who are pretty horrified by what is happening to Britain, to our education system, the lack of policing of our borders, and the reminder that VE was last week of what it was that our parents and grandparents fought for, that's just been given away over the last 20 years, but particularly by the last two governments. And what he describes is a growing frustration in our society. Children being asked to learn more about Islam in Christian communities. This is something the parents do not want to happen, but it's being rammed down their throats. I don't need to go into all the details of this. You read the newspapers, you watch what's happening, you know how our society is changing demographically, and you know that if we go back 100 years and then 1,000 years before that, there have never been previously any icons, monuments to foreign gods in our land, but there are now, and they're everywhere. And our society, the governance of our society, is completely turned away from the Judeo-Christian heritage. What David Betts says is going to happen ultimately is not going to be instigated by an act of violence by the perpetrators. Let me explain that. He says that there is no real appetite amongst the English, amongst the British, for hurting people. He said the idea of, we have seen things, we've seen the troubles in Northern Ireland, but it's not people's first reaction when they feel powerless as they do now. We have an example from the 17th century in the first English civil wars of how it can happen. But he says, Betts says, there's no real appetite for that now, to actually start attacking people. He believes that what will happen is the largely rural population, traditional rural England, out of the cities, is going to get so fed up that they're going to bring about the collapse of our towns and cities. And then he said, look, I'm not going to give you a terrorist manual here. But I can tell you from personal experience, from a conversation I had right here with a member of the somebody from the National Grid. He said to me, I could take a person to the exact pylon that if you took a still saw to the base of it and cut through the pylon in a couple of places, and that pylon fell over, it would bring down Britain's electricity system. He said, that's how easy it is for people who understand to collapse he said, we've got a gas grid, we've got an electricity grid. And what Betts was saying, these of course are things that none of us would support, none of us would condone, but he's a professor trying to understand what's likely to happen based on his historical and current knowledge. And he's saying that there will be an element in society eventually that is pushed so far that they will react in that way. And when that happens, he says, what will ensue is carnage and conflict in the towns and cities. And there'll be a new order emerges from that, because the supply chain for towns and cities in the modern world is so fragile. Everything about it, getting food in and out, getting food, getting waste out, everything about it runs like clockwork in a kind of amazing synchronicity. And when any part of it breaks down, well, you don't need me to explain the consequences. My own personal view, and it's not changed over 20 years, is that something is going to happen in time that will bring about a division in our land. I've talked about it, I think, on this platform before. A civil war would explain it. What I've seen prophetically in the past could be the outworking of civil war. So one of the things which I'm sure you're all observing in all of the different major things that are happening in the world, there's always a focus back onto the Jewish people. So if there's an issue with money, it's going to be the greedy Jewish bankers. If it's an issue to do with the Middle East, it's because of Gaza. It's history repeating itself on steroids now, as the Jewish people are being more and more demonized. I mean, can you imagine that a young singer is having to be trained in how to make a performance for her country, for Israel, at Eurovision, being trained on how to do it when people are booing? I mean, my goodness me, there is anti-Semitism almost everywhere we look. And if I'm right, and if David Betts is right, that something's coming which is going to change our society, something that's going to be very, very difficult, everything to do with business, everything that we've got used to, it's kind of like a new day, because if that happens, everything changes. And I suspect that when that happens, it will coincide with a time of great where the Jews are seen as the enemies, even to a greater extent than they are now. And people like us, who will not necessarily stand with every political move of a secular Israeli government, but would absolutely stand four square with a Jewish person, we're going to be persecuted too. And we're going to have to be prepared for that, because these days are coming. I can't say that it's next week, next month, next year, but the exponential rate of change, I've described there a few minutes ago, the exponential change in the availability of knowledge to the ordinary man. I mean, but this is everywhere, everything that we're involved in, and things that we are we've become used to. Things that you could take for granted, like the lights being on, like being able to go and order your new tights from Marks and Spencer's online. We can't take it for granted anymore. I mean, that's a case in point, because my wife can't order her tights from Marks and Spencer's. You've probably heard of their massive cyber attack, and they still haven't recovered from it. They may never fully recover from it. So we're living in a very uncertain world. There's lots of, you've just heard me describe artificial intelligence's analysis of what's going on in the world and how it links to the book of Revelation, but we will never know the day nor the hour. We'll just sense the change in the wind, and there's a change in the wind now, and we've really got to make sure that things we've been putting off doing, we do now. The next thing that I want to do, and I hope I'm still okay for time, am I, Brenda? Yeah, okay. If I'm still okay for time, I want to read you.
Nick, there's plenty of time.
Good.
You know, you haven't got to rush this.
I'm not on the stopwatch. Great. So some of you will know David Noakes. David Noakes, wonderful biblical scholar. I always think of him like a little Churchill, a prophetic man himself, very well spoken, and bless him, he's now in his early 80s, I believe, and he has agreed to become a trustee of Issachar People. He actually and Muriel Forshaw, who some of you will also know, have agreed to join us. And during the week, David sent our editor at Prophecy Today, which is the online magazine, a prophecy which he had received, which he thought merited publication. Now, as with all things prophetic, we must test them ourselves. David believed it had merit. I've read it, and I'm not in a, nor would I, I'm not in a position to say to our editor, you must publish this. My job is to say, actually, I sense it's worth doing. So I want to read it to you. No one has read this prophecy yet, other than David and our trustees, but I really felt it sort of aligns with some of the things that I've been saying here, and how our kind of attitude needs towards God, and turning back to God needs to change. Perhaps to say that differently, how our reliance upon God and our understanding of our reliance upon God needs to change, because the foundations of our society are crumbling, and there are going to be days when they really crumble before our eyes. So let me read it. I don't know the name of this person, but I will read it out to you. This is a person that David knows very well, a trusted source in his view, a Christian lady. And it's called Turning Point. Mark chapter 14, verses 48 to 50. Then Jesus answered and said to them, have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs to take me? I was daily with you in the temple teaching, and you did not seize me. But the scriptures must be fulfilled. Then they all forsook him and fled. A turning point is coming. I bring you this warning. So this is a warning to the church. Daily you have resided with them, communed and embraced them without a second thought. You didn't perceive their threat, and under the banners of peace and love thy neighbor, you united. Did you not know they're not of my kingdom and do not know me? Or worse, did you know and not care? Do not claim ignorance. My word is clear on those who will not inherit the kingdom of God, and even then I have sent you my servants as my mouthpiece, teachers, preachers, prophets, yet you gave no authority to my word. Time and again you align, unite, and entangle yourselves with people and agendas that are wicked. I will have nothing to do with them, so why do you entertain them, their corruption and their idolatry? What is coming you've brought upon yourselves. Where you've not remained in me, I will not abide in you. And so a turning point is coming. They will turn on you. Watch as they come out as with swords and clubs to take you. But we were with you daily in peace, you'll say to them. Foolish ones. You allowed the cultural narrative of today to entice you into a false sense of security. They were never your friend, and now the tide is turning, and wickedness will be exposed as they come out with force to seize you. What then? Will you forsake me and flee? Know this, I have a faithful remnant who would not allow themselves to be tarnished with what is not of my kingdom. To them I say, will you remain with me, though it means suffering? For my purposes must be fulfilled. Trust me and remain close to me, as in the night hours we must journey through, my accusers and persecutors, but after you have suffered a little while, I'll raise you up. The surviving root of my house will take root downward and bear fruit upward. You'll be separated and cleansed from those that for now bear my name, but soon they'll be unable to bear my holy name, as they have not been counted worthy. Be prepared. A turning point is coming, church. Your friend will become exposed as your enemy. To those who haven't remained in me will turn away and turn back, but my dear remnant, more than ever now, me you must turn to. Take heed and hear my voice today. Do not harden your hearts. It is not yet too late to turn fully to me. Though you betray me, if you repent and turn away, I will still receive you and watch over you in the days ahead. But time is running out. Choose this day whom you will serve. I will not have mixture. Choose me and choose life, for I am jealous for you. You betray me, yet my love still remains for you. What must I do? I have offered everything to you, and my arms remain open to you. If only you would turn to me before it is too late.
Nick, can you just confirm that scripture in Mark, please? Thanks.
Mark chapter 14, verses 48 to 50.
Thank you.
So when I read that, and I just read that for the first time yesterday when it was sent, I think of what's happening in our country, in our national institution, our state church, in the Roman Catholic Church, and I think of all of those wonderful old ladies, people still in those establishments who are faithfully going to chase after God. They're not going to be left aside. We will not know all of their individual circumstances, who they are, but I remain very hopeful that as the world darkens, as these things begin to emerge that I've been talking about, that more and more people will turn to God. I described right at the beginning of my talk how in the depths of despair, my daughter and her husband, the very first thing they did was to turn to God. And I really believe that in some of the more difficult circumstances that we're going to see, many people will literally be on their knees in despair, crying out to a God that they don't even yet know, and they will turn to Christ, and I believe that Christ will receive them. So one of the reasons that I don't look gloomy or sound gloomy, in spite of the fact there's some pretty gloomy news out there, is because all of this fills me with hope. God is going to fulfill every promise that he's made. His faithful remnant, he will be with them to the end. And we, brothers and sisters, in him will do exploits that we've never imagined. I mean, we will do the most amazing things. There's so many things I could talk about. I could talk about, what's happening in the tax on farmers, and lots of things that are happening, which together cumulatively are going to bring about a societal change of the kind that I've described. But I just want to bring something personal that was a real encouragement to me this week, and I hope it encourages you too. So some of you will know that I'm a private pilot, and I have a little vintage aeroplane. It's a bit kind of metal tube and fabric. This isn't a jumbo jet or anything like that. It's about the value of a Mini Cooper. But I love flying this little thing. It's a tailwheel. Now, years and years ago, and I'm talking 25 years ago, when I believe the Lord was talking to me about a future time when there would be, well, the sort of difficulty I've described, some sort of civil unrest, some sort of division in the land, perhaps a civil war. I felt at the time that he gave me a single word to sum up what our response as Christians would be, well, part of our response. And that single word was stealth. That we will be doing certain things which were visible, but that we would also, out of sight, under the radar, be doing something else. Now, here, think about the underground church in China. When things weren't possible because of the authoritarian state, you couldn't do certain things. You could do things if they were hidden from view. So this, as a pilot, this concept of being sort of stealth and under the radar meant quite a bit to me. And I remember my wife buying me this picture, which was of a World War II Lysander aeroplane. And this aeroplane was the kind that was used to rescue some of our airmen and people, even spies that had been sent over into the continent, because it could go under the radar, it could land in little fields, and it would rescue people, you see. So this is quite special to me. Anyway, last week was VE Day, 80th anniversary. And I'd been to a lovely place called the Lincolnshire Aviation Heritage Museum. And for those of you who've been may have not have been there, it was a bomber base, and it's a place where a Lancaster bomber it's actually restored to working order. In fact, within a couple of years, they're hoping to actually fly it. But at the moment, it's allowed to taxi up and down the grass runway there. They also have a mosquito, and there's a wonderful little chapel there. It's just a great place to visit. Anyway, while I was there with my wife a few weeks ago, I said, "Can private pilots come in on this runway?" And they said, "Yes, prior permission required. If you phone us and it's convenient, yes." Well, I wanted to go last weekend, but the weather wasn't right. The wind was right across the runway. I kept checking during the week. Well, VE Day was the 8th, wasn't it? That was Thursday. So Thursday morning, I look at my weather app and it goes, "Wow, the wind's coming straight down the runway at the museum. Let me phone them up." So I phoned them up. I said, "My name's Nick Skeeler. I phoned before. I said I'd like, if possible, to have permission to bring Golf Bravo Uniform Delta Echo to visit the museum, because I hear you're taxiing the Lancaster today." "Yes, that'll be fine. Just make sure you're here before 1:15, because we're taking it out at 1:30. So I set off, and I was with Humberside Radar, giving me what's called a flight following service. They're basically just looking after you in the air until I got somewhere near the RAF base, RAF Coningsby. Now, people like me don't often go near military airspace for a very good reason, but I was required to go to military airspace because Coningsby is right next door to this museum at East Kirby. So they handed me over to the radar controller at Coningsby, and I said, "Golf Bravo Uniform Delta Echo, pass your message." I said, "Piper PA-20 from Sherburn. I'm planning to come and land at East Kirby. Could I have permission to come in?" So he asked me for my height, and then he said, permission to enter the mats, not above 600 feet. Not above 600 feet. And then I realized he's got jets coming in and out of the runway. The only way I can get in is if I go under the radar. So I went into the mats, 580 feet. There was a runway, and I landed. The chap immediately, who was looking after proceedings there, said, can you move a little bit further up the fence, because we're also going to bring the Mosquito out. And he said, I think 627,000 cc Rolls-Royce engines all going at once with those propellers might just blow your little plane around a bit. So I moved it up. But for me, I mean, obviously it was exciting because, you know, I've got this marvelous picture now of my little aeroplane on the grass and the Lancaster bomber next to it. You know, it's like one of those bucket list things. But it was also a reminder to me, you were able to go in under the radar. You were even given permission to go in under the radar. And that felt very special to me. What I believe is that in the difficult circumstances and the difficult situations that we're going to find ourselves in, if and when some of these things happen that I've talked about, if we're listening, if we have turned to God fully, and we ask him in every situation what to do, whether it's medicines for a sick daughter or a sick dog, or whatever it may be about, I believe that God will give us the answers that we need to have. It seems to me that we're something of a Gideon's army. I don't think there are millions of people like us in Britain. I don't even know that there are hundreds of thousands of people like us, but there are people like us, and God is speaking to us. God will not fail us. God will not deceive us. He needs to use this end time army to bring about his purposes. And all we have to do, we don't need to use artificial intelligence to work it out. All we have to do is listen, and when we hear, obey. And then it'll work out well for us, as it will for the kingdom. Thanks for listening.
Oh, thank you, Nick. That's given us a lot to think about. I wonder if I could just ask you something on behalf of